Glad tidings, rapscallions. It's me, Mucky Mitts, also known as Paul, and basically I am here for another episode of It's Okay to Suck and Start Again. Can you believe it's the 4th episode? I do try to keep these pretty short and sweet, but sometimes I do have a tendency to ramble on a little bit. Anyhow, so basically what I've been talking about over the last few weeks is the whole theme of this is, as it is on the tin, it's okay to suck and start again. I don't edit the videos. I don't do any fancy effects or bells and whistles. There's no stuff like that. I might play a little bit of music here and there. But overall, the whole theme is, well, you know, life, you can't just edit life, can you? You have to go through it. And I'm kind of sort of just regaling a few stories about my life at the moment and building a bigger picture to how I came to learn how, you know, to basically start producing music and things like that. And, you know, I think one good point and a place to start is, you know, 5 years ago, really, because there was a certain time, well, 6 years ago actually, can you believe it, 6 years since that P word happened, you know, when the whole world went a little bit crazy and a bit like, whoa. So basically, I am a barber of, well, a hairdresser and a barber of 27 years this year. I know I don't look old enough, do I? But then I started making, you know, like I've done other things, I've done all sorts, but my whole sort of thesis on this, it's okay to suck and start again, is I have failed so many times in my life and I've fallen flat on my face and I failed doing things that I didn't want to do. And I feel like unless you failed a few times chasing your dreams, you don't, you don't really build up the resilience. Now, obviously, the P word of C, you know, the C20, C19, you know, that kind of era brought a lot of good, but a lot of bad things. And I think, like, I've always said this, you know, we all experienced it a little bit differently. We all had our own little things that we had to go through. We all had our own little battles. And for me, predominantly, it turned out to be quite positive, because I'm now doing, you know, I've got to go back in October because I've kind of messed up this year, but I've got to go back in October to finish off my psychology degree. I wouldn't be doing my psychology degree if it hadn't been from that, you know, that period in 2020 to like 2022 or whatever, however long it went on for. I wouldn't be producing music. I wouldn't have done some of the other things, like I tried my hand at stonemasonry because I got a job working as a stonemason's labourer. I wouldn't had, and that led to a conversation that probably changed my view on money and people who have money, and it also led to me learning to invest. But prior to the you know, that sort of horrible time where we all got locked up and stuff like that, I'd just saved, like, for the first time I'd finally got some money together. I've had some savings, not a substantial amount, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds, but I had about £3,000 or £4,000, and it was just sat there. And I have a friend, or had a friend at the time, who was a financial advisor, so I was like, could you teach me how to invest my money, please? And he basically was all up for that. I put some money in a pot. He told me to put, you know, like, just say, like, whatever you're looking to invest, just put it away. And basically, if you do that, don't look at this for you know, a few months, and then come back to me when you feel comfortable and we'll look at investing it for you. So, you know, as I'm getting a bit older, I want to start making, you know, some better financial decisions, because going off previous videos, you'll know that I, for a long time, had a drink issue, and a other issue that involved taking other things. I've got to be very careful what I say on YouTube. It's a bit annoying, to be honest, because you can't talk as openly as you'd like, but I think you're smart cookies. I think you can work it out yourselves, can't you? So basically, yeah. So I had a bit of a. I mean, to be fair, for the all intents and purposes of most of my wild late teens to sort of like early 30s, I did lots of crazy things, and some of them I'm not overly proud of, and some of them that if I could change I probably would, but then would I? Because then I might would, maybe I wouldn't be this person, and for whatever reason. Anyway, so going back to the era beginning of 2020, so we got put into I weren't allowed to work. I'm a barber by trade. I've been in the hairdressing industry now for the best part of 30 years. I'm 27 years this year. So I did that pretty much straight from school, and it's given me a good living. But unfortunately, during that sort of era, I wasn't allowed to work, and I wasn't entitled to any furlough because I'd been in and out of the UK for quite some time, and I'd kind of been a bit of a ghost to the system, if I'm honest. So, and this is another, big benefit of what happened in, like that time of, that period of time. It made me sort of like I had to go onto universal credit. But without doing that, I wouldn't have done my access course, and I wouldn't be doing my psychology degree. So, but I kind of felt like I'd got it all sussed out. I'd got an ambassadorship for a scissor company. They were helping me promote my education business. I was trying to be better at teaching barbering and men's hairdressing. So then I'd a potential, deal with somebody to go and deliver some education for them up, around Ireland. And they potentially talked about helping me set up my own studio, like my own hairdressing studio. So it would have been, I mean, it felt like everything was on a plate. I was teaching in a college in Belfast as well. And it was all, everything was there, money to one side, start investing. Like I'd finally sussed life out a little bit. And, at that, how old would I be? 30, sort of coming into my late 30s. So, it was all good. And I was like, but then it just felt like somebody just pulled the rug from underneath me. And unfortunately, that was like, bugger. Do you know what I mean? I had to, that money that I was going to invest had to sustain me. I was begging that they'd let us go back to work, or, I managed to do loads of different things just to keep. I ended up, doing some labouring for a landscape gardening company. Went to work in retail for a bit. I just did whatever I had to do to survive, to stay and keep moving forward. And like I say, I did an access course, but at this time I'd started learning to play the guitar, and I just had hours every day, just to play guitar. So I kind of feel like, yeah, it was tough, but at the same time, one thing that you'll come familiar with, I say a lot, is we make fire in the dark, and sometimes it's when your back's up against the wall, like I personally do my best work, because I can, as time's ticked on, I'm in a much better position. But again, going back to the labouring, like I ended up working with a guy who was a stonemason. Through him, I ended up getting into crypto. Now, whatever you may think and what you feel about cryptocurrencies and stuff like that, personally, I think it's inevitable. Like, things are going to happen with it. I did do originally my YouTube channel was about teaching people how to get into crypto and stuff like that, but then I kind of realized that a lot of people don't understand how money actually works. And then I started looking at, I've got a TikTok page that I started like trying to teach people basic financial literacy. But I don't think TikTok's the place for that, to be honest. It's quite complex. It's quite, it's not as complex once you sort of get into, once you start understanding fractional banking and things like that. But that's for another time. So basically, yeah, so like I say, it's all right to suck and start again. So I basically had to like start from ground zero once, you know, we were allowed out of lockdown, and I moved back to sort of Manchester for a bit, and now, you know, like I'm just living outside of Manchester now, just in Cheshire. And I've been here for 4 years, like in the same place, in the same house. I've worked in the same barber shop for 3 years, and these things have never ever happened. But this is where I sort of like lean towards. I'm getting a little bit fed up. I do want to move out of England at some point. The idea was to get my degree, some experience in youth work, and take that experience and move to maybe Australia, which I still think about going for. I've lived there twice already. I sometimes think, should I go for third time lucky? But at the minute, I don't know. I'm saying it's okay to suck and start again, but I've started again so many times that, is it? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm 44 this year. Have I got one more go in me? You know, I'm in a really good position at the moment. But ideally, what I'd like to do is get my music moving, and you know, I'd like to earn a remote income, you know, and I can't do that with barbering because, well, I need to be in the place where I'm cutting hair. Although in the gym, again, like in the gym today, I was in, you know, and I've got speaking to the gym manager, and he says, why don't you rent out our little room? You could like cut hair in here, you know. And I thought, God, you know, that's not a bad idea. That's like, you know, I could cut hair just in the gym. So now that's, you know, that's another, like, it could be a potential sideline, but it still means I've got to be there, doesn't it? And you know, it doesn't pay brilliantly, you know, like. But then again, I suppose if I'm only renting that room and I rent it for a day, I've got potentially whatever that room is. I should have asked him how much he wants to rent it out for a day. But like, say if I did that once a week on top of what I do, but it kind of takes me back to working 5 days a week, and I'm doing youth work like for a couple of hours on a Monday. I volunteer on a Tuesday night. So like my one day off is, and I'm really trying to sort of get into my music and stuff like that. So you know, like I say, I'm sorry, I'm waffling on a little bit, but basically, you know, what I'm trying to say is, you know, and I'm very conscious of how long these videos get. I will build them up once I get a bit of an audience, but I do think like I'm keeping them around about 15 minutes. But like what I say, you know, that was like, I got steamrolled, you know, 6 years ago, and it made me think differently. And it goes back to sort of like, it's not a mistake or it's not a failure if you learn from it. And I think this is the thing. So many people are so afraid of failure, it dictates what their decisions are and what they'll do with their life. And I think from my own experience, and I am a little bit more sort of, I don't know, less risk sensitive, because I have failed so many times. I've lost so many jobs, and I've walked out of just as many. And I've never been afraid of, because I do have a skill that is needed in places. You know, everybody needs a haircut, don't they? So I suppose I have got that to fall back on, and maybe sometimes I do forget about that, and sometimes maybe. But going back to sort of, if you have a desire, something that you want to do, like I've just started writing some songs recently, like more lyrics and stuff like that, you know, and I'm not saying I'm like the next, you know, John Lennon or Alex Turner or somebody like that, but you know, it's another avenue of creativity for me, you know, and even if nothing comes of it. So I've tried, haven't I? It's not what I'm gonna like. I'm not gonna regret not trying, am I? That is what I feel for a lot of people. Is it'll come when you get talking to older people, and I mean older people like 60s, 70s, 80s. Oh God, you know, I wish I'd have I wish I'd have done that, or I wish I'd have travelled more, or you know. And I always think, will your future you thank you for what decisions you make today? So on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you, but maybe just think about mapping this out in your head. And I said this last week, but I'll say it again. If you was to chase it, think about the scenario you're in now. Are you happy? If you're not happy and you've got something that you really love to do and you feel like it's almost like it scares you, then I think you should definitely do it within reason. If it's going to involve hurting people and stuff like that, then probably don't do that. But I think, I mean, I would love to be able to like be in a position financially to help people, sort of just like almost like a secret millionaire, just go around and help. But unfortunately, you can't just go around fixing people's lives because they've kind of got to do a bit of the heavy lifting themselves. But make a decision, have a look. What's that holiday you've always wanted to go on? Have you wanted to travel? What's that car? What's that one thing? Because everybody's different. We're all different, and if we weren't, it'd be very, very boring. So just something for you to ruminate on and think about. Don't overthink it. Just sit down and think, well, I'd love to be able to play the guitar. How do I go from that? One thing that I've learned, is the best way to learn to play the guitar is to buy one, watch some YouTube videos and learn the chords, and then learn your scales, and then just learn a few songs with 4 chords in or 3 chords. And you know what? It's a good little hobby to get you through the night. Maybe you want to learn to sing. Maybe you want to, maybe you like drawing. Maybe, you did art at school. Maybe you tried your hand at like hairdressing or barbering or something at school. Maybe you just hate your job in general, but you're too scared because, finances have got you in a situation. Maybe you just want to clear yourself out of debt and you've been burying your head in the sand. All these things are achievable. And I think if you just sit there for 1 minute and take your head out of the sand or whatever, or just, have a moment when you're like away from doom scrolling and think about the one thing that you'd really love to do. And would it be really, really bad? What's the worst that could happen if you did it and it didn't quite work out? On that note, it's been a pleasure, and I hopefully catch you next week. This has been Mucky Mitts once again, and we will see you next Monday for part 5 of It's Okay to Suck and Start Again. All right. Toodle pip.